3, 2, 1. Bienvenido a Miami. Going to Miami. Welcome back, everybody, to the Strategy Sprints podcast. I'm your host, Simon Severino, and my guest today is in Miami. He is a TEDx speaker, host of the Self-Employed Life podcast with over 1 million downloads, author of Lingo, Discover Your Ideal Customer Secret Language, and Make Your Business Irresistible, and the forthcoming book, The Self-Employed Life. Welcome, everybody. Jeffrey Shaw.
Hey, I'm glad to be here with you.
So cool. We never had anybody talking about specifically self-employed businesses. So I'm pumped. What's the difference? Freelancer, self-employed, entrepreneur?
Well, that's the problem. Nobody's making that distinction, you know. And I've been self-employed my entire life, literally since the age of 14. I've never had a traditional job. I never received a paycheck from anybody, so it's all I've known. And you know, often when something's so familiar to us, we don't see it as being unique. But it's a unique experience being self-employed. And I realized that nobody's talking about it. And when I started writing my book, The Self-Employed Life, because I felt like this was a conversation the world needed to have, I started hiring people to do keyword research and SEO. I was relaunching my website, and only to find out that no one is using the term self-employed. And I realized that's a core problem. Right? Because being self-employed is different than entrepreneurship. It's different than freelancer. And actually, in my book, I go kind of through this breakdown where, you know, for me, one of the big problems is the most commonly searched term relative to self-employment, if you will, is small business. But the problem is small business is really inaccurate because in the US anyway, small business is up to 500 employees. Now, 80% of small businesses have fewer than 20 employees. And more so, how about the companies that are fewer than 5? How about the companies of 1, which are the ones I really care about? And those are the self-employed businesses. And I realize we're harming ourselves by not embracing the terminology of self-employed life. And I think that's a key component, because to be self-employed, it is not just your business, it's your life decisions. So that's why I hone in on self-employed and separate it from all the other terms, because I think once embraced, it more accurately describes the lifestyle and the business model. And that's important.
What's the difference, self-employed, freelancer?
Yeah. So a lot of the differences in these terms are vibes. Okay. So when somebody says freelancers, hey, I want to like the term because I like the word free in it. But the fact of the matter is thefreelancer can also sound like you're a fly by night, right? Freelancer can also sound like you don't have a serious business model. Same thing as entrepreneur. You know, entrepreneur has shifted over the years. I think I've always thought entrepreneur was kind of a cool thing I wanted to call myself. The problem is now a lot of people interpret entrepreneur as kind of in between jobs, or they associate entrepreneur with like extreme hustle, which isn't necessarily the way people want to receive businesses and feel about businesses today. So I just can't find a term that's better than self-employed. Like I said, I like freelancer. I like the lifestyle it represents. I just don't think you're serving yourself as a business owner by calling yourself a freelancer, because I think you're also implying that you're not in it for the long haul. And I think in the end, that's a detriment.
Absolutely. So I guess I am self-employed because since decades, I pay my own salary. And so let's explore. How's the life of the self-employed people right now in this funky year?
Well, you know, I mean, hey, we always prove ourselves to be the most resilient, right? I mean, I think that's the cool thing. I think that one of the bigger challenges, and I don't know how this feels in other countries, but in the US, when the pandemic hit, I had already begun my book. So it's an audience I care deeply about. But very early in the pandemic, the US government started talking about the CARES Act. Okay, which would introduce these what were called the PPP loans, which are paycheck protection loans. And I immediately got really concerned that, as has always been the past, the self-employed business owners would be left out, because most government programs tended to be of businesses of a certain size, usually much larger than self-employed businesses. And one of my biggest concerns was, and then, well, it changed, right? So what we had actually, the result of that was, for the first time in US history, self-employed business owners were called out in legislation. But here's what my concern was to the point of your question, is that I was afraid self-employed people are so used to making it on their own, so used to taking the hit to the chin, that they weren't going to ask for the help that was actually being legislated and made available to them. I was genuinely concerned, and it proved out to be the case that a lot of self-employed people are just like, hey, I'm so used to figuring this out on my own that they didn't even notice that there actually was help available. So I think the state of self-employment right now is in a really good place, because I think for the first time, I think a lot of self-employed businesses are recognizing that we need to support one another, if not get support from each other. We are the most adaptable, most resilient, and it's a trend. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, and I'm willing to bet this statistic holds true in most countries, by 2030, the expectation is here in the US that 54% of the US population will be self-employed. The trend is towards self-employment for a couple of reasons. One, with every time there's an increase in unemployment, there's an increase in self-employment. That makes sense. We also have younger generations that all they know are side hustles, right? The younger even more so like Gen Z, they're all about the side hustle, so that they can stay at home, raise their kids, travel as they want to. So without a doubt, and there's even evidence with LinkedIn. We could talk about that too, but LinkedIn has pivoted and made some changes in their platform to adjust for personal brands and what they expect to be an increase in self-employment. So I think the world of self-employment is very healthy and thriving.
How many people are self-employed right now in the world?
So in the world, I don't know, because I've looked at this here. I will give you a compare. Here in the US, I think in 2019, 30 million US citizens filed a Schedule C, which would indicate self-employment. But if you include gig workers in there, your Uber drivers, Etsy creators, the projection is about 57 million in the US alone. Right? That's a bigger population than a lot of countries. So I really don't think there's huge differences in the ratios in most countries. So it's only growing.
And what I'd be curious about is how many of them are profitable. I'm sure many do good revenues, but how many of them are like really profitable? It creates more than they need.
Yeah, well, hey, let's look at it this way. An indication of that is the fact that for the first time in history, the US government stepped up to protect self-employed businesses. It's not because they're nice people and they're doing it at the kindness of heart. It's because self-employed businesses and small businesses drive the economy, no doubt. So they are profitable. They can be profitable, and they're profitable, if not in individual businesses in big numbers, profitable in volume. When you have that much of a citizenship being self-employed, like I said, it's not a mistake that governments are recognizing and offering financial stability to self-employed businesses. It's not out of the kindness of the hearts. It's because it's the backbone of an economy.
Now, some people are naturally born self-employed because they're just unemployable like me. There is no way you can manage me.
I agree.
So the unemployable people, of course, we self-employ. What about the in-between people who have both options? Is there some trait of personality or some criteria where you would say, hey, be careful. If you have this trait, don't go self-employed.
That's a really interesting question. If you don't have this trait, I would say, first of all, I believe you learn to become what is necessary in a lot of ways. And not everybody is cut out for self-employment, for sure. I would say probably the most overriding characteristics that is needed. So if you're lacking this might not be self-employment would not be your right choice, is resiliency. I mean, it is such an up and down experience. It's not a linear experience. You're going to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back. It is so not linear, but it's actually one of the foundational concepts of my book, because throughout the years, I've asked every self-employed person I've ever asked why they became self-employed has the same answer. And it's a myth. Everybody says, oh, I became self-employed because I want to control my destiny. I want to control my future. I want to control the hours I worked. And I was like, well, how's that going for you? And everybody laughs, because the reality is it's a myth that you're going to gain control, because when you're self-employed, you are more subject to the uncontrollable circumstances around you, whether it's the economy changing or market shifts. You're more susceptible to uncontrollable circumstances. What I have deemed possible and what I teach in my book is that you can't control the circumstances. The only thing you can do is create the environment that you want, that you create for the results you want. That you can control. You can control what you set up. You can control the environment for the results you want. And the rest of it, you have to allow it to be, but it's not linear. So I would say, more than anything, it takes a whole lot of resiliency and the ability to pick yourself up. And I'll say a good sprinkling of patience, because a true self-employed business owner never achieves the results they want as quickly as they want, ever. We're terrible with patience. So if those two things get under your skin, then I would say self-employment is probably not for you.
Most things are out of our control. And if I think of what is really in my control, it's three things. It's my daily habit, my weekly habit, and my monthly habit. That's it. So my daily habit is how I apply my time, attention, resources. And if I learn from that, my weekly habit is getting all the marketing numbers, sales numbers, and ops numbers to learn from them. And my monthly habit is to check our positioning, our strategy, our vision, and our mindset. But everything else, really, we need to adapt week by week.
Yeah, but to your point, you're creating the environment for the results you want. And so in my book, I introduce what I call the self-employed ecosystem. The self-employed ecosystem consists of personal development, business strategies, and daily habits. So I love that you mentioned that, right? Because that is, and honestly, Simon, that's usually the most common missing element. And it's the most critical, because you need consistency in order to create consistent mindsets. The only way you can stay on track in uncontrollable circumstances is to have consistency to your life, so that you don't get derailed. Otherwise, you're being pulled all over the place with the inconsistency of the world. So you're so right with your habit breakdown. I love that.
I learned it the hard way, because being self-employed for 17 years, you get punched in the face so many times that at some point you say, okay, I gotta control this.
Mm-hmm.
And you find nothing that you can control. So every day in the morning, I'm in control. The first 3 hours of my day, they are in my control. 5:15, I do my vision, which is really feeling, sensing in 3 years where my business is, how it feels, how it smells, how it tastes. Then I do some breathing techniques to really even anchor that even more, and to be centered. And then I go for exercise, because I let it marinate in and embody.
Mm-hmm.
And then breakfast, and then much later my kids wake up, I play with them, and then I go to do my business. But still, I don't check emails or news. I do deep work, writing, reading, and then in the afternoon, all the emails, meetings, and all that crazy stuff, where we serve, of course, the priorities of everybody else around us.
Beautiful. My habits are somewhat similar. There's for me, my big consistent habits in the morning are meditation and reading. I read for about an hour to an hour and a half every day. Always nonfiction, always business. Most often books that for authors I'm going to interview on my podcast. I meditate, and I go for a nice long walk with my dog. I live on the ocean, so that's refueling for me. So it's consistency is, I said, consistent patterns and consistent habits creates a consistent mindset, and that's critical to being self-employed.
And I want to know of all these books that you have read, the 3 top. But after, one word from our sponsors.
Hey, if you love what you are hearing, you will love our free masterclasses. Go grab them at strategysprints.com.
We're back in Miami. The best of your books.
Oh my gosh. And this is so hard because I read 100 books a year. I read 2 books a week. It's something I live by. So it's hard to pick a favorite, but I'm going to go with these. So one for sure, and it's not a new book, and that's what I love. If it holds up, it's good. It's To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink. That book really reframed how I felt about selling, which, to be honest with you, Simon, unlike a lot of people, selling never creeped me out. I've always felt fine with selling. I've always felt deserving of selling my services. And so it's never been a hang up. But what I loved about To Sell is Human is that it shifted my mindset to really focusing on moving people. And if you look at it from a business perspective, we're trying to move people from indecision to decision. We're trying to move people into our services. We're trying to move people from one level of service to another. But what I really latched on to is the step before that is we need to emotionally move them before we can expect them to move from one service to another or one decision to another. So I really like how the book framed for me. My takeaway from it was what it raised the bar for me to really step into emotionally moving people before an ask. Okay, so that's one book.
I watched his masterclass and he's so funny. He says, it's like the weather. It's everywhere. He's so funny.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I've interviewed him. My second book, not a popular one, is called Change or Die. And I was fascinated by this one because as a trained coach in the personal development business, of course, I'm intrigued by what really inspires change. And I think same thing, like in my new book, I explore a lot about where motivation really comes from. And as I think the answers to many things, whether it's change or motivation, is backwards of what it seems. And what I found fascinating about Change or Die is that it was written by a heart surgeon. And the author became intrigued as to why such a small percentage of his heart patients changed their life in order to save their life. And he realized that fundamentally change is usually inspired the wrong way, because especially in the medical field, we often try to initiate change through force, facts, and fear. And it's not what inspires people to create lasting change. What creates lasting change is giving people a reframe, a different way to look at things, a community to relate to, so they have support, and repetition, sort of like what you and I were just saying. So that's been a really instrumental book in how, as a coach, how I have inspired my clients to make big and substantial changes in their lives. And the third one is a brand new book. It's actually not out yet. It's called Swagger by Leslie M. E-H-M is how you spell her last name. Leslie, she's a good friend. And I will tell you, I mean, whenever I'm reading a book of a good friend, they're at a disadvantage, because if I know them well, it's hard for me to be impressed by their book. In all fairness, it's just a warning for all my friends. I read your books, like, I'm holding you to a different standard because you're not a stranger to me. But even under that higher standard, Leslie's book Swagger blew me away. I think it's one of the best books I've read in probably the past 3 to 4 years. Swagger, you'd have to hear Leslie define swagger. My takeaway about swagger is it's being comfortable in your skin. It's not cockiness. It's not that shoulder swagging stuff. It's not fake it till you make it. It is really being truly comfortable in your skin. But where I see this as a game-changing and life-changing book is I think it's the new conversation in the world. We've been having a lot of conversations for years about vulnerability and imposter syndrome and inner critic, and all is well and good. But where do we go with it from here? Swagger, to me, is the answer to all those conversations. Swagger, to me, is about dropping into what you already have that's been covered up, and really stepping into your swagger to answer the imposter syndrome and the inner critic and the self-doubt and the lack of self-worth. Swagger is the answer to all of it. And I truly think this book is a game changer. So there are my 3 books.
Beautiful. Yeah. And Swagger was never mentioned here. Beautiful.
It's a brand new book. Comes out May 10th, and it's a game changer. Everybody needs to pre-order it and get ready.
And what are you excited about, looking forward with your business, with your activities?
Oh gosh, the conversation on self-employment is so underutilized. So what I'm most excited about is I feel like I'm creating a whole world for self-employed people. I created a page on my website, which is theselfemployedlife.me. And it's supposed to be the book page, right? But I told my publisher, I said, I can't just like put a book up there, because the fact matters, I'm creating an entire world for self-employed people. Yes, it's the book, but I'm just coming off this past Monday and Tuesday. I organized and led a 2-day online self-employed summit with 10 speakers, hundreds of people in attendance. It was amazing. It proved itself that it needs to be an annual event, because there is no annual event for self-employed business owners. It doesn't exist. So I created an online version, and I'm either going to continue it as an online version, or I may do a live version here in Miami. I've got my podcast, The Self-Employed Life. I've created an assessment tool, which is selfemployedassessment.com, so that people can see where they need to work on their self-employed system. I'm creating an educational business school specifically for self-employed people. I'm writing articles. I started an advocacy group so that I could represent self-employed businesses on a governmental level and make sure that our rights are protected. So what I'm excited about, as you can tell by this is a long list of things I've accomplished in the past year. And it's because I want to create a world for self-employed business owners, because nobody else is doing it. And actually, it was Leslie M., who I just spoke of, Wagger, when I was complaining to her that nobody's doing this. Nobody's talking to self-employed business owners. And she looked at me and said, and why not you? And I said, you're right. Why not me? And so that's what I'm excited about. I'm really excited about creating a whole world for self-employed business owners, so that we get the information we need. We're not running all over the place, and we don't feel like we're in it alone.
So cool. And tell us about your podcast. When did you start? Why did you start?
So my podcast, now called The Self-Employed Life, was rebranded this past September, when I really started taking ownership of this space of self-employed business owners. It was previously called Creative Warriors. I started it in July of 2014. So it's been over 7 years. We've broadcast nearly 700 episodes. We're in over 200 countries. We get about 30,000 listeners a month. So it's grown a lot over the years. And I started it as Creative Warriors because I have been, for 36 years, a family portrait photographer for very affluent families. And I do very little of it today, but that was my mainstay income for 25 years prior to pivoting to coaching about 12 years ago. And so I started it initially as a podcast for creatives in business, and that it takes the spirit of a warrior to make it through, right? But what I realized is that it wasn't the problems I was solving wasn't just the problems of creatives in business. It was the problems of self-employed business owners. So the show broadened to include many, many more industries than just those in creative businesses. And that's why in this past year, it just made sense to just rebrand it and call it what it is, and make it The Self-Employed Life.
Beautiful. I will listen to it. And many here listening right now, they like podcasts, because otherwise they wouldn't be here. And they are self-employed. So people, let's hop on it. Beautiful. There is a world for us. Let's go there. Beautiful.
Yes.
Where can people stay in touch with you best?
Well, I mentioned the aforementioned the self-employed, excuse me, the self-employedlife.me. It's a great place to start. My main website is jeffreyshaw.com, but I like to be more specific, so you don't have to hunt around. You don't have time to hunt around for stuff. So go to the selfemployedlife.me. And really, I think a useful thing for everybody listening to do is to take that assessment. It's a brand new tool. It's a custom algorithm, and that can be found at selfemployedassessment.com, because it will, the beginning of change is first knowing what needs to be changed. It's awareness, right? Change begins with awareness. And that custom algorithm, after you answer a few questions, will start pointing you in the direction of what needs to be changed. And then there are opportunities for videos for further exploration. So to me, that's a great way to get to know my thought processes. And I always lean towards building relationships first. So maybe the best place to start is selfemployedassessment.com.
And 2 more questions to Miami. One is, when everybody zigs, this person zags, but from your perspective, this person is doing the right thing. Who do you pick for a strategy award?
This was a tough one, because, of course, I also wanted to say Leslie M., but I'm actually going to go with, because I wanted to give you some variety, I'm going to go with another friend, but a well-known author. His name is Brant Menswar. And I chose him mainly because of the zagging part, right? To me, Brant Brant is literally a rock star. He's in a band, and he used to be quite a well-known musician. He's zigzagged into speaking, and he wrote a book that came out last year called Black Sheep, which is just a fantastic book. It's about finding what he calls your black sheep values, which are your unchangeable core values. And Brant has a way of, so I guess, why is that important? It's not just important. It's not, knowing your core values is not just a nice to have. And when I started asking Brant questions about this, I was very clear. Like, I've done a lot of coaching. I've received over 1,000 hours of training. But what the difference is, by understanding your core values, it's how you show up in the world changes how people see you. And that is how the end result is that you get customers that you're aligned with. If you're a speaker like I am, you have events reaching out to you for you to speak that you are perfectly aligned with. It changes your alignment in life. When you know your core values, you express your core values. People that are either intrigued or agree with those core values are drawn into your life. But what also makes Brant zigzag is that he's really changing up the world of book promoting, because when he launched his book, he found some of the traditional way of marketing books to be ineffective. So he now has started, he and a partner have started a company called Bookstar PR, for which I am a client of, because I believe in what he's doing so much. And it's really looking at marketing a traditional medium like books in a different way. And it's cool. He's doing some really cool things, or his agency is doing some really cool things. So he's definitely a guy that zags when other people, or zigs when other people zag.
And who should be my next guest?
I have to go with Leslie M. Because of the message of swagger. She'll also be one of the most entertaining people you'll ever meet. I always say she's the biggest heart walking around on the world on two legs with the mouth of a truck driver. So she's just, she just knows how to get the job done. She embodies what it means to have swagger. So without a doubt, your next guest should be Leslie M.
Absolutely. I'm intrigued. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for being on the show. You have some new followers on your podcast, and please come back soon.
I'd love to. Thank you for having me.
Avoid trying to do thousands of things that doesn't work. We have 274 templates for your business success. Reach your ambitious goals with one-on-one sprint coach. We double your revenue,